Good evening to everyone. Welcome to 7 Days 7 webinars on wildlife on the occasion of Wildlife Week 2024, conducted by Aganashini Nature Foundation. Aganashini Nature Foundation is an environmental conservation organization by providing nature education, awareness, and outreach programs for students and community peoples. I hope all you attended yesterday's webinar. This is fourth webinar on the occasion of Wildlife Week. So today we have webinar on biodiversity conservation in the changing world by Dr. R Vasudeva. Dr. R Vasudeva is a professor of forest biology and dean of College of Forestry, Sirsi Karnataka, and also he is a member at board of management of University of Agricultural Sciences and a board of directors of Section 8 company. I request Dr. R Vasudeva sir to take over the session.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My camera is not working. Sorry for that. First of all, I would like to thank the Aganashini group and my students for having wonderfully organized this seminar. Let me ask you, am I audible correctly?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dhananjay, and all the team from College of Forestry, Sirsi, who have taken a very good lead in organizing this wonderful seminar, webinar rather. Okay. I am Professor Vasudeva, working as Professor of Forest Biology and also acting as a Dean from past 1.5 years in the College of Forestry, Sirsi, University of Agricultural Sciences, Dharwad. Let me tell you, for those of you who have been from different parts of the country, where am I coming from? As you see here, this is India and Karnataka state, one of the leading states in India, and Uttar Kannada, one of the most forested district of Karnataka state is Uttar Kannada. And as you see here, geographically speaking, our College of Forestry Sirsi is right in the heart of the Western Ghats, which is considered as one of the hotspots of biological diversity. So that's why it offers an unprecedented opportunity to the students for having a very good learning abilities and then learning experiences in the field of forestry, environment, and conservation. And those of you who would like to see, it's very nearer to Goa, something like around 210 kilometers from Goa. That's where I am situated right now. And a brief thing about my college. This is a constituent college of University of Agricultural Sciences, Dharwad. And UAS Dharwad is a state agriculture university set up by ICAR and run by the university as well as the state government. It was established and attained a college status in 1997. And our college, though it is tiny, it is accredited by 2 mega accreditation units of the country. One is ICAR, another is ICFRE, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, Indian Council for Forest Research and Extension. We have produced till date about 36 IFS officers and more than 250 state forest officers. Apart from that, we have our alumni who have reached the top stage of forest management, conservation, up to the level of Principal Chief Conservator of Forests in Karnataka and elsewhere in the state. The college has got a lot of accreditation and recognition too. Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education, Dehradun, during the year 2019, we got the ICFRE Award for Excellence in Forestry Research. Very recently, our college students have contributed immensely towards the accrue of Guinness World Record of making turmeric Ganesha idols, which is supposed to be the one of the major environmental campaign that was conducted by the Pollution Control Board of Karnataka. Okay, well, friends, let me ask you a question to start with. What percent of the species that have evolved on this planet Earth have become extinct? All of you very well know about the story of dinosaurs. So after the movie, Hollywood movie, dinosaurs became almost the hero, and then everybody knows about them. So life has evolved on the face of this earth about 4 billion years ago, and then it is evolving continuously. Suppose you put all the species that have evolved on the face of the earth 100%, what percent of them have become extinct? That's my question to you to think over first. So, any answers? I will repeat the question. What percentage of the species have evolved on the planet of Earth have become extinct? Okay, this is 1 minute traffic. Uh, the answer
90%.
is, yeah.
90%.
Oh, excellent. It's where you are very, very near to that, 99%. So scientists believe that 99% of all the plants and animal species that have evolved are ever lived have now become extinct. So that means becoming extinct is a natural phenomenon. Then why are you worrying about conservation? Isn't it? That's a major problem. The crux lays in the answer that why did this 99% become extinct and how did they become extinct? How are species today becoming extinct? So that's the most important question we should ask. So how do we know about extinction that are occurring? So people study fossil records. So this is a rocky layers that you see here. Every layer contains some kind of a fossils. So when you go deeper and deeper into the rock layers, we are actually traveling back in evolutionary time scale and then look at what kind of fossils you get. And based on the number of fossils you get, you will understand the rate of extinction. Maybe in some layer, you have huge number of species that are recovered. That means during that period, there is a huge number of animals and plants have become extinct. That's how one can study. So people were wondering that the life has originated 4 billion years ago, and then they are keep on evolving, and those which are unfit, they are becoming extinct. So people thought that the extinction process should be a gradual one. There is a kind of a steady increase in number of species that go extinct. But unfortunately, it is not like that. There are spikes in the evolutionary time scale where the species have become extinct in a short period of time to a very great extent. These are called as mass extinctions. What exactly is a mass extinction? When at least half of the species, whatever the animals or plants, die. Die is not a good word. Become extinct within a relatively short period of time. When I say short period of time, it is actually the evolutionary time scale that you are talking about, maybe tens of thousands of millions of years ago. So we know these extensions through fossil record, and then fossils of plants that are in the early layers that are there, and then now become completely absent. So there are 5 major episodes of extinctions that have occurred, and you must have studied PUC or in your degree program. So 450 million years before present, there was this Ordovician extinction, which was caused by sudden global cooling. And then there was a lot of extinction of marine organisms. The second came about 370 million years ago in Devonian extinction. And this Permian extinction is an important one, which occurred about 245 million years ago, where 90% of the species died and only 10% survived. Remember this particular term. That's third Permian extinction million of years ago. Fourth is a very, very popular one, Jurassic. So Jurassic Park was there. Okay. So the cause is unknown. Why did Jurassic extinction became? There are many theories. About 210 million years ago. And then Cretaceous, very recently, about 65 million years ago, because of the collision of a comet or a meteor or a very huge volcanic eruption, the dinosaurs, marine life, everything that became really extinct. About 75% of the animals became extinct. So these are some of the spike. So those of you who do not like the graph, just go through very quickly. On the x-axis, we have million years before present. This is where we are right now today, and every dot is an extinction that occurring. As you see here, you have spikes, A, B, C, D, E. These are 5 major extinctions, and also the number of families that became extinct are existing that particular time. So this is there is a dip here, there is a dip there, there is a huge dip Permian, and then this is the latest one. So, but people, scientists believe today we are in the midst of an extinction crisis. This is called as the sixth mass extinction. Uh, Typically, the species that evolve on the face of the earth become extinct gradually with some background noise. But today, scientists believe that by more than 100 times more than the normal background rate of extinction, today we are actually witnessing extinction. So it is said that in the next 30 years, about 20% of the world's biodiversity may be lost. So the current rate of extinction of species may equal or even exceed the rate of Permian mass extinction. As you remember, Permian mass extinction was the most hard hitting on the life on Earth. 90% of the species that evolved on that became extinct then. And today people are believing that today's extinction rates are much, much greater than this Permian mass extinction. So these statements reflect the growing concern with the rapid loss of biological diversity as a result of anthropogenic effects on the environment. How is the sixth extinction that we are experiencing today is different from the last 5 mass extinctions? We are in the midst of the extinction. It's something like this. Suppose you're walking in a shola forest, you wouldn't know that you are in a shola forest. And then as you enter into the grassland, you will suddenly realize that you were in a very dark forest and entered into a grassland. So that's how it is. We are within the extinction, but we are not realizing it. While all the 5 major extinctions that occurred previously were because of a natural calamity, it could be a comet, it could be a, volcanic eruption, etc. But today's mass extinction is completely driven by the modern human beings. We are the drivers of this mass extinction today. Humans have destroyed almost 10% of the Earth's wilderness in last 25 years. Okay, so this is a drone picture, as you can see here. This is a kind of a burning of forest where you have burned one portion of it, otherwise it would have been a lush green tropical forest. There is one data available called the wilderness and globally significant wilderness areas. So this has been mapped, and then what kind of changes in the distribution of the wilderness habitat is happening is being mapped. What you see as the red is the most dangerous, and then wherever there is a large-scale destruction of the habitats, you find that red ones. So today, scientists have alarmed that there is a 1/10, almost 3.3 million square kilometers of wilderness is being lost. Particularly in Amazon, 30% of Amazon is gone. Central Africa, around 14% are gone. So we are changing the face of the earth very, very drastically and very, very quickly. Friends, you remember that the Ordovician extinction occurred over a period of at least about 500,000 years. But today we are losing these wilderness as well as the species within 100 years, maybe 300, 400 years. That's the problem that we are having. So sixth extinction is kicking real, and it is problematic. So some specifics about the mass extinction. People have now generated estimates. We are losing annually 30,000 species. That means 3 species per hour. So before we finish this particular talk, 3 species would have become extinct. 1/5 of all the living species could become extinct in next 30 years. And then this is entirely due to human activity, mostly due to the destruction of the plant and animal habitats. So today, we are witnessing a global crisis of mass extinction. So this is where people became very, very disturbed in the last about 30, 40, 60 years. And the the whole new branch of biology called the conservation biology as a branch of science became more important. So conservation biology, what exactly is conservation biology? Very quickly, it's a multidisciplinary science that has evolved in response to the crisis confronting biological diversity today. So that means if there were to be no extinction, a very high rate of extinction, we would not have studied conservation biology. This conservation biology complements the applied disciplines by providing a general theoretical approach to the protection of biological diversity. Let me also describe to you in about 1 minute two what are the features of this science of biological conservation biology. As I said, it's a crisis science. So it has evolved to cope with the crisis that we are talking about, the mass extinction that we are in. And it requires a multidisciplinary approach. It is not that it's only with respect to botany, zoology, forestry, environmental science. It is a multidisciplinary science. Everybody has to contribute. And unfortunately, it is not like physics or chemistry, which is inexact science. So it's not 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 in a conservation biology. And it's often value laden. What do we mean by value laden is, suppose you want to now convert a small piece of land of forest into an agriculture land, you have to take a call based on the social needs. You have to now take a call based on the value associated with the society, which actually it has. So it's not that it's completely, so whatever happens in America should be applied to India, should apply to Africa like that. So we have to now take a call on the space and time basis. And it requires a lot of innovation, flexibility, multiple talent, and a very, very clear understanding of the ecological complexities that are underlying the process of biological evolution. And friends, we have to think on the evolutionary time scale. So that means it's at least about 10,000s of years scale. So what are we doing in a conservation biology is that we are understanding what is the effect of human activities on species, communities, and ecosystems. Suppose we make a harbor, suppose we make a railway road, or convert a small piece of land into agroforestry, what kind of species influences it as on a particular species, on a particular community, or on the ecosystem services that we get. That's the first. Secondly, we have to develop a practical approach to prevent the extinction of the species, and if possible, to reintegrate the endangered species into a properly functioning systems. So the primary consideration of conservation biology today is the protection of the entire biological community on a long-term basis, and taking economic factors as secondary consideration. Even if you lose, let's say, $1 million because of protection of a small piece of land, that should be given a second chance than the first one. Unfortunately, this goal is the one which is completely being defeated today. Just to give you some more information about modern conservation biology, way back in 1978 in California, USA, the first international conference on biological diversity was done in San Diego. And Michael Soule and then Bruce Wilcox wrote the first book in 1980 conservation biology. When we were UG students, we were accessing this particular rare book in the library to read it. Okay. Well, friends, today, just like any science that evolves, the conservation biology is also evolving. There is a huge amount of climate change that is happening. The world is changing. So is the conservation biology. So I'm going to tell you today what are the different stages at which the conservation biology is evolving. What are the tools? What are the procedures? What are the approaches that is taking shape? And how, as an youngster, you can contribute and you can fit into the biological conservation or conservation biologist. I would like to draw analogy to all of you of one very well-known fact that there are industrial revolution. You remember some 300, 400 years back, the steam engine was actually invented. So the railways became the modern conveyance methodology. That's where the industry started becoming more and more powerful. This industry, people call it as industrial revolution 1.0. It's like your mobile generation, generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. So in the second generation of industry, uh, there was this assembly lines built up to build a car, and then industrial development happened. Thirdly, there is this IT development, automation came into the industry that became 3.0. And today we have cyber physical systems. Industry is now going back or getting to the fourth revolution where two different motorcycles can talk to each other. It's not the drivers that actually talk to each other. That's how things are happening in industry. So industrial revolution is very clearly, there is industrial revolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. Similar analogy is being now made in the revolutions of conservation science. Conservation science 1, 2, 3. Maybe we are entering conservation 3.0. Let me tell you very, very briefly what are these conservation 1.0 and then 2.0, 3.0. Basically, because if you understand the fundas very clearly, you can become a very good, evolve into a system scientist where you can contribute better. Conservation science 1.0. So this is mostly animal-centric. Remember, about 100 years back, we had these game sanctuaries by the Maharajas of Mysore, Maharajas of, let's say, Baroda, Maharajas of Gujarat, so on and so forth. So then they were converted into the wildlife parks, preserves, national park, wildlife sanctuary, etc. So most of them were animal-centric. Even today, you have tiger reserve, you have elephant reserve, you have crocodile reserve, elephant park, so on and so forth. So what do we do in a setting up a park? So as a conservation biologist, you set aside a chunk of forest. Okay, call it as a park, call it as a preserve, call it as it's a place for nature, and then nobody can enter it. It's a no-go area. National parks and other nature preserves have been the mainstay of conservation during that particular 1.0. It is a very good material, extremely good. One of the most important contributions have come from most of the wilderness areas, habitat that has been conserved as a national park or a wildlife sanctuary. This is popularly called as fortress conservation. Fortress means it's a kind of a khajana, like you put all your species into khajana, lock it, and nobody can enter it. Only those who have the key, the officers and the wildlife managers, can enter into it. That's the kind of attitude or the mindset with which the 1.0 happened. Some people call it as fortress conservation because it forces a mutually exclusive trade-off between conserving biological diversity and meeting human needs. That means humans are completely cut off, so you can't enter. So it is for the lion and not for the human. This is for the tiger and not for the human. It's for the elephant, not for the human. So, but unfortunately, what happened was, in the last 50 years, the demand for food, water, energy, and the natural resources have evolved, and then they have become so high that walling off nature like a fortress may not help. So that's the problem we are associating with, we are now confronting with. Most of the problems associated with this particular 1.0 conservation is that you have human-animal interaction conflict, and then there is a lot of societal problems associated with that. Unfortunately, there is also fundamental problems with respect to this approach. What is it? Let me give you one of the problems. See, how have we selected this in situ and in situ conservation sites? Let's say we take the example of Nagarole Tiger Reserve, or let us say Corbett Tiger Reserve, etc. So they have been considered not because of very high genetic variability of a particular species or a group of species that are present, but because of there was a game sanctuary earlier. There was some kind of a already established fortress that was existing. So most of the sites were established for a non-genetic or primarily aesthetic and ecological grounds, and not based on the genetic variability of a species. Remember, you may have a wonderfully very high tiger population in India, but if somebody looks at the is the genetic diversity of the tigers that are existing in all the different pockets, is it sufficient enough to for the species to become there for a very long time, let's say 1000 years, 10,000 years? The answer is no. Suppose you look at the northwestern population of tigers, the tiger variability, genetic variability is extremely low. So I'm not telling that the wildlife sanctuaries are bad or wildlife sanctuaries are not good. What I'm telling is they are not sufficient, basically because they have been established with a kind of different approach. Let me make my argument strong by giving you a small example. Again, going back to my own Uttar Kannada district, Karnataka, this is Uttar Kannada district, that's where I'm coming from. And this was the protected area called Dandeli Tiger Reserve, Dandeli Sanctuary, I think, Wildlife Sanctuary in 1954. This is the area, and that is the kind of, completely the district. Come to 1975, some good government came and declared half of the entire district as wildlife sanctuary. Meanwhile, there was an establishment of a factory called the Dandeli Paper Factory, which required huge resources of bamboo and others, for which there was a taboo. You cannot cut the bamboo from a wildlife sanctuary. So what happened in 1988? This was denotified, and then this was notified as the wildlife sanctuary. 1954, 1975, 1988. 1988, there was a plundering of the resources here, and then the factory made a lot of papers, sold, etc. So they thought that, look, we have all established here, and this was conserved for about 30 years. Let us take it out. So this wildlife sanctuary was denotified, and that became the notified area, 1988. And 2003, the opposite happened. So what I'm telling you is that though the wildlife sanctuaries are good, their geographical designation is changing, and we are changing, we are extracting. So even if you go to Uttar Kannada district, anywhere 1 square kilometer, you don't get a habitat which is not logged. Maybe in a steep slope or inaccessible area, you get a forest which is totally virgin. So my argument is that the 1.0 mindset of establishing the wildlife sanctuaries, parks, and forgetting about other aspects of conservation biology may not be sufficient. This is actually the beginning of what we call it as the second generation of conservation biology. There is another argument which maybe I will tell in a few sentences. There is a species called Disoxylum malabaricum. So if you go to the hardcore wildlife sanctuary, the number of Disoxylum malabaricum in a pristine forest occurs something like around 1 in a few hundred hectares. Suppose you want to now conserve, let us say, about 1 lakh such individuals of Disoxylum malabaricum. You require extremely huge area. So you require a very huge area. So, but we don't have such area. Obviously, we will be very, very happy with, let's say, 100 trees 500 trees, 2000 trees that are there in a sanctuary and feel very happy about it. So this is not sufficient. So potentially this could actually lead to the loss of genetic variability due to a fact called drift and then inbreeding that you all know about. So with this background came the conservation biology 2.0. In this particular, we are entering it, or we are already in the mid of it maybe. In this one, what we recognize is that it recognizes that nature provides many essential benefits to people. People talking about the ecosystem services like clean drinking water, wood, fish, protective soils to grow the crops, etc. So a person in a metro like Bangalore or in Madras, when he actually washes his hand, he is actually mostly getting water from a conserved forest that is there in Talakaveri or Kodagu or Coorg area. So people started recognizing that, look, even though the protected area is there for elephants or let's say for tiger, it is doing more than that. It is actually giving an ecological service. It could be food, fiber, goods, life-fulfilling aspects. It could be biota. It could be even wild genes, for instance. For instance, some of the wild genes that actually took away the very, very important disease of a rice came from a small area of Kerala, from a wild rice that occurred in forested area. So people started recognizing it. So people started recognizing that, look, forests have better value. So the conservation biologists should now look at these values correctly, more pronouncedly. So in this, it actually motivates a broader investment in protecting nature by connecting the dots between nature and human well-being through food security, water security, health effects, cultural values. So it can actually demonstrate to meet the vital human needs. So that's the most important aspect that it is required. But passive provisioning of ecological services on nature's current productivity may not be enough to meet the projected demands. So human population is increasing. Even though we recognize and then we protect to some extent, it may not be sufficient to completely hold that. Apart from the in the 1.0 conservation science, we had these wilderness setting aside the parks and then setting aside some nature reserves. In this era, we started looking at complementary conservation strategies. That means instead of employing only, let's say, in situ and ex situ, people started employing combination of methods to conserve the gene pool. So no single method can actually conserve the overall biological diversity or the genetic diversity, to be precise. We have to start using all available methods to conserve the gene pool. The functional point is that the CCS, the complementary conservation strategy, appears to be a combination of methods. In principle, it's a decision-making process leading to conservation of ecosystem. So let me tell you how some of the most important methods have evolved in this particular era. We know that we have the ex situ banks and then in situ areas for the preservation. We have now identified a new method called the forest gene bank, a method which actually employs both the virtues of in situ and ex situ methods. It combines the virtues of in situ and ex situ methods to make conservation more productive. So what are these gene banks? Let me give you an example. We are working with a species called Semicarpus cathlacanensis, which is an endemic species. Hardly there are 200 individuals in the entire world, and mostly it is found in about half a dozen pockets. So one of the pockets is near the Joke Falls, which is quite good. And then there are others which are dwindling, like, because there is no protection, they are all dwindling. So if you want to protect through, let us say, in situ protection, you have to give protection to all of them. Or you have to now make an ex situ Unfortunately, you cannot create the habitat that is required for this particular species because it occurs only in the freshwater swamps. So you cannot make ex situ conservation an important one here. So what we have now called this as a forest gene bank is we take the propagules. It could be seed, it could be wilding, it could be a pollen grain from all the different sources, and then deposit as if somebody is depositing money into a bank. When you deposit the money into a bank, it multiplies. It gives you interest. Similarly, the genes that were otherwise go extinct would be deposited here. Since they are all belonging to the same species, they start exchanging the genes and evolve into a new system. So this kind of forest gene bank concept actually came into existence. That's how the complementary conservation strategy is now actually happening. So complementary conservation here, this has a method of what we did was we took the seeds to our back to the nursery, we grew them to some extent, and then put it back to the wilderness. So it combines. So don't think ex situ and in situ as the only two methodologies to conserve. You have other methods that are evolving. That's how the conservation science is also evolving. So in fact, some of the powerful tools that emerged during this particular period is that we started looking at animals and plants from the space. In fact, we can enter into the DNA of the cells to look at what differences that are there between, let's say, Dandeli tiger versus the tiger that is in Corbett. And also, we started looking at the information from scat and dung. Okay. But today, the science is contributing, and then information science is contributing to a very great extent to the conservation science. The very fact that we are all sitting here right now discussing about the conservation science is because of this particular era called Conservation 3.0. Let me tell you how it is going to be. In this era of 3.0, there may be some amount of deliberate management of nature, and then these steps can deliberately manage nature, sometimes engineer in some ways in order to maximize nature's ability to supply food, water, energy, at the same time supporting biological diversity. What's happening in Latin America? Latin America is now today is completely devastated with, or it's facing a very, very great water crisis. The people from Colombia, Costa Rica, Peru, Brazil, Mexico, and other nations recognize that the sustainable growth of human societies requires protection of watershed, and then these watersheds can now be, the cost of protecting the watershed can be now raised by people. Remember, when Dandeli Wildlife Sanctuary is established, the whole maintenance of it has to be now looked into by the government. But today, the thinking is that why not, as a citizen, as a nature lover, you contribute something to the protection. It's something like this. As I said, in Bangalore, if somebody takes a cup of water that is actually pumped in from Talakaveri, he has to pay for it. So pay for ecosystem services is now becoming. You can Google this man, Johnny Borona. He's the director for Rivers Water Fund for Life and Sustainability in Colombia, where he has initiated more than 32 water funds for which they are now providing money to protect 7 million acres of watersheds to secure the drinking water purposes for more than 50 million people. So today, we may be entering into an era where every city dweller has to now look at when he drinks a water, when he wastes water for, let us say, toilet, he has to now pay for it. So that's how it can be now siphoned back for the protection of these water bodies. And in this particular era, also some of the most important conservation tools have been developed. I am not an expert in this. I'm just flagging some of these techniques. This is called as a FIT technique, or the footprint identification technique. It's a non-invasive, cost-effective, sustainable method of identifying endangered species. Not only the species, people can now identify an individual, to what sex a particular cheetah belongs to, what age class it belongs to, so on and so forth. Okay. In fact, this fit is a distillation of the ancient tracking skills into the modern technology with the use of the very modern information science. In fact, this is being tried in Namibian cheetah, and then individuals have been recognized. Like individual cheetah can be now traced back by looking at this technique. Now, why I'm telling is that to become a conservation biologist, you need not be a hardcore life scientist. You need not study biology, botany or anything like that. So wherever you are, you can start contributing it. So this is the first technique. The second technique is genetic barcoding. Even if you can identify a species with $1 per sample using a unique DNA sequence called genetic barcoding. As you all very well aware of it, genetic barcoding is actually becoming extremely popular today to identify to the individual species. Like maybe there are some scientists here who can now tell me about DNA barcoding is also has a resolution today to identify at least the populations. Okay. In fact, we have been working on such areas in our lab. We have now developed the barcode for Garcinia group of species like Garcinia indica, Garcinia morella, Gammigata, talboti, and xanthoscymus, and then that's how one can actually look at it. So these become extremely important even in the medicine, for instance. For instance, most of the species are also used for medicinal purposes. So if you tell that I have used in Ashoka arista, the Ashoka bark, the DNA barcode should be available with the sample that can be established. So that's the kind of thing. And another tool that we are trying to develop is that we are using artificial intelligence based smartphone app. We are developing it for the identification of commercially important timber species. Suppose you go to a timber shop to buy a furniture, people will fool you very clearly that they give you acacia, call it as teak, or they give teak and call it as something else. So one can identify this. Such tools become very, very handy to trace back or the timber traffic. So that means you can track the timber like Red Sanders. The famous film of Pushpa, where people are now trying to look at the red sanders, and then once the red sanders is harvested from a particular place, you can track that particular thing. One can do that. So in fact, these are some of the tools that are actually becoming very, very important in this particular era. Well, friends, let me also tell you some of the most significant climate change that is happening, where our efforts are extremely important, integrated efforts of most of the different branches of science to cope with the climate resilient landscapes. If you go to Canada, where the exchequer to the government comes from, almost 40% of it comes from extraction of timber, basically pines. What actually you are seeing is maybe a 25 kilometers range of forest in Canada. It should have been completely green. What you're seeing is actually some kind of a reddish one. These are actually all individuals of pine that have died because of one particular small beetle. We are now witnessing wide-scale tree mortality across the entire world. You take any country, there is a large-scale tree mortality that is occurring. India, a world may be entering into a new era of tree death and forest transformation, the process that will reduce the contribution of the forest by removing the anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions from the atmosphere. This is basically a byproduct of the climate change that we are looking at. So once the climate change, by raising the global temperature by, let us say, half a degree, many unprecedented things can happen. A small, I'll tell you this, the pine is actually dying because of this small beetle called mountain pine beetle, which is not more than few millimeters. Okay, But because of the higher temperature, it reproduces so drastically that it started killing the pine. And the annual mortality rate of pine forests in Canada today is touching almost 5%. That means 5% of the trees are dying. It cannot be used for anything except for fuel wood. And this is because of a change in, let's say, maybe 0.8 degrees, zero point 1, 0.6 degrees. So wherever there is a red hot spot, the pine forests are actually dying. So likewise, there are 140 different instances of tree death, large-scale tree death that is occurring world over. Every white pine that you see here is actually an episode of tree mortality. So, in fact, you have 14 such reported cases in Asia, 25 in Europe, 27 in North America, and many of which are actually not reported. In fact, our own boys have identified more than 12 species in Uttar Kannada forest itself. They are dying. In my campus, at least 4 species have, the individuals of 4 species have died because of bark beetle and some kind of a increased death because of disease. So climate change induced tree death caused by either the insect attack or the disease attack is changing the world. And well, friends, we are in a tipping point. Like, it's like like a titration. You are looking at drop by drop, the reagent is coming. It is still blue, but at one particular point it becomes red. So things can go extremely bad if you do not look at it. So there are many instances. I am not going to the details of it. So now, how are we actually redesigning our forests? So now genomic selection is being done, where through the genomic selection, we are now trying to evolve a climate resilient pines. We means the scientists. Of course, pine is not our cup of tea. So people are now trying to look at what kind of forests can be now grown in. Otherwise, everything is going to die. So we are now trying to create a forest with identified adapted sources for the future resilience of the forest. Like, if you go without such these efforts, we may lose the entire forest. So 20 years down the lane, if there is a temperature raised by 1 degree, what kind of pine genotype should be planted there? That's how the people are thinking. So in fact, we are now been working on these aspects in our own area on another species of Disoxylum. We are now trying to look at how the genotypes are now being changing in different parts of the Western Ghats. So building climate resilient ecosystems, which is a fundamental aspect of conserving biological diversity, is a very important task today, which is not going to be happening by a single institute or in one branch of science. We need climate data, phenotypic data, we need field data, and we have to now do this. So that is one thing that the conservation science is now looking at it very vehemently. The second one is the cloning technology to recreate the species that have become extinct. In fact, maybe some scientists are nearer close to the creation of a mammoth. So once you have a living tissue of a particular species, the scientists can now create a living organism. So we may find a mammoth which can actually come into alive in maybe next 30-40 years. Well, friends, I was talking to you that the very fact that we are all meeting today on a Google Meet, all over the country and listening and then understanding the concepts very clearly within 1 hour is basically because of the revolution that have occurred in information science. So today, people are now telling that the crowd-sourced observations, crowd-sourced data is one of the most important data for conservation. Cell phones have moved the societies beyond the traditional infrastructure barriers. I remember I went to Chennai to listen to Schaller's talk on Asiatic lions. So I went in a train, traveled without food, and then I sat in a very small place, looked at his face, and etc. Today, because of the information science, we can now start exchange our ideas very nicely. So in fact, this can also facilitate the participation of the citizens for conservation. We know that there are citizen scientists today on frog conservation, which you are all very well aware. Karthik was instrumental in developing it, I think so. And then they can be now engaged. Tourists can be engaged. Indigenous communities can be engaged. So now they can track, they can now tell the animal movements, etc. So some of the examples of crowdsourced data is that first, 8 billion recreational visits were made annually to the all terrestrial protected areas alone. Tourist-based photographic surveys in Kruger National Park contribute to African wild dog and cheetah surveys. The indigenous communities and experts, trackers with the traditional knowledge can now tell more about it. So the citizen scientists collect data on land cover, changes in the Western Ghats. I remember some of my friends in A3, they have made an effort to identify how the in the wilderness of Western Ghats, the exotic weeds are now growing. So every citizen scientist, one who has a cell phone, can contribute. So the idea of giving all the examples here is that if you want to become a conservation biologist, you need not go behind, clicking a photograph of a colorful butterfly, or go chase a striped mammal, or go behind a large tusker. You can sit at home and then contribute with your own expertise. Be that kind of a man to contribute to the conservation science. So conservation biology today is a new synthesis. We have old school of population biology, ecology, taxonomy, genetics. They contribute new ideas, approaches for the utilization and conservation. And the resource management like forestry, fisheries, they come out with field experiences and the research needs of on the field. And there is a huge amount of social sciences, environmental sciences, ethics, law. I have not touched anything about ethics and law and policy. Those are also becoming extremely good. So to conclude my talk, this is the summary. We are now moving from conservation 1 to 3. The basic philosophies getting modified and better. Basic focus of an animal-centric conservation is now moving towards the recognizing the evolutionary processes, the ecological processes that are there, and then we may deliberately manage the nature to maximize the ability of the nature to supply, as well as it can start conserving as much as possible. So integrating science, policy, practice, and create biological biodiversity benefits in terms of diverse, well-managed ecosystems is the most important aspects. Having said that, new technologies alone cannot save the species. For example, improving technologies alone cannot prevent poaching. So you have to have solutions which are based in society. Solutions require appropriate tools for the appropriate right of the people. Habitat loss is another major driver which is of a very great concern. The challenge here is to connect the existing sophisticated remote sensing and then species occurrence data to predict where the species can remain. So, well, friends, that was my talk. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Now I can take some questions.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure. Tell your name. I can't hear. I can't see yours. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Kiran. I am from South India, Kerala.
Okay.
Recently, what I am seeing is there are a lot of man-animal conflicts nearly, near to the Western Ghats. Actually, the Kerala, the entire eastern side is the adjacent to Western Ghats. So a lot of man-animal conflicts, and in general, people are telling the population of wildlife is increasing. So
Yeah.
it's getting a political issue, and all the politicians, they are very much inclined to protect people and these things. So I don't know, somehow a kind of feel against the wildlife is there in the state. That is
Yeah.
little bit alarming, but at the same time, yes, there are many incidents. How to deal with these things?
Yeah. See, as I said, conservation is highly value-laden science. So, what a scientist can do is to give some kind of a solutions. To adapt it or not will become the game of governments. You very well know about the reports of Kasturi Rangan, Dr. Professor Madhav Gadgil, for which I
Yes.
was afraid. So though they were extremely good and then little controversial, some of them may not be practical, but the whole society as a thing, it completely rejected it. So my point here is that if you want to become a conservation biologist, you should now go for advocacy. So more and more people, when they start crying for conservation, when they start, impressing upon the governments to go for adoption of either the scientific methods or that, then the change will happen. So there is a more than any time in the past. Today, there is a policy advocacy and the people's participation in creating public awareness and some kind of a policing is required by the society to improve. So how do we do it? We do not know. So we have to take many different methods. Like it could be writing an article, making a public issue, going and meeting the press, so on and so forth. So this is the only solution. We have to educate our policymakers.
Am I audible, sir?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So my question is that what role does environmental policy play in combating habitat loss due to urbanization and deforestation?
Wonderful. Thank you. May I know your name and where are you from?
I'm Priyank Patil, sir. I'm from Dharwad, sir, Karnataka. I'm studying MSc in marine biology.
Excellent. So if you are studying marine biology in Karwar, just walk around and then come up little up in the Sharavati belt and look at some specific habitats called freshwater swamps. Okay. These are called as Rampatre Jeddi or Rampatre Kadu. Okay. These are all freshwater swamps. These swamps, how exactly we used our policy. When I was in the Western Ghat Task Force, we identified that water is the most important aspect in a freshwater swamp because most of the organisms have adapted to be in that particular aquatic environment or wet, messy environment throughout the year. But there was a policy by the government where they used to siphon off the water that is coming on a freshwater swamp to irrigate or to divert it as a agricultural purposes. This was a state-funded project. So people, the government gave money to divert the water and then use it for the agriculture. So what we did was we have approached the government and then changed that particular aspect, at least in areas where these are very critical. So understanding very deeply a kind of a local problem and applying these policies are extremely important. So study the policy very well. You will gain a lot of confidence and also results in your conservation of marine aspects also.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
Sir.
good evening. Sir,
Yeah,
am
go
I
ahead.
audible?
You all of you are audible. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, my name is Manjusha. I'm from Kerala. I'm an alumni of TNAU.
Great.
Your session was amazing. It was highly informative. I've got two doubts. The
Yeah.
first one is like, what percentage of forest species could be or so far conserved as DNA libraries? What's the role of DNA libraries in conservation of forest species?
Yeah.
That's my
So
first question. And the second one,
yeah.
shall I ask it now or
Is it related or different?
no? It's a different one.
DNA libraries is like, putting a frame today. Okay. So you have an excellent picture of cheetah in front of you, and then that's how you have it. But it is important basically because we do not know when the science leaps and creates the new organisms from that. I wouldn't brush it away as a non-significant, but still an important one. What percentage of the animal species have been conserved? I really do not know. I have to dig it out and tell you. Yeah. Second question.
Second one is like it's about that climate resilient landscaping. So it
Yeah.
is how far is this genomic selection in trees is practical? Trees are a perennial kind of creatures. Like by the time we identify a climate resilient tree variety, the conditions would have changed and a new
Yes.
problem would have emerged. So
Yeah.
how far it is practical?
Yeah. So as far as I know, this has been already achieved in pines. So there is a pine group. You can go to Canada website, Canada Forest Department website or so, where about a battery of 25 different groups of people are working, trying to look at. So what they have done is the following. So what did you study? You know about forestry provenance, something like that?
No, sir. I'm a
Okay, anyway.
biotechnology
Okay,
graduate.
fine. Excellent. So, see, it's something like this. You know that teak occurs from Gujarat to Kerala. So, Gujarat is very dry, Kerala is very wet. Okay. Obviously, the genes that have evolved over millions of years in Gujarat are entirely different than in the Kerala. Now, the scientists have tried to look at what kind of specific genes are involved in imparting the drought resistance to pine beetle, resistance to, let us say, dieback disease. They have achieved. So they collect, hundreds and thousands of sources of seeds, sow them, and then practically conduct a common garden experiments by increasing the carbon dioxide, decreasing it, so on and so forth. So there are few, sources becomes extremely good and other sources become very weak. Okay, so that's how they select it and then identify the genes and try to look at. So this is how they create it. Okay, this is how they create. Some may be extremely good, some may be very bad, some may be moderate like that. So now they are trying to look at what kind of virtues that an individual has and then go about it. I would say that there are 90% success rate has been done in case of pine. Can we do it in India? Yes, we can do. What kind of species we require to do? We need to prioritize. So I would say teak sal and then some bamboo species are the most important, basically because very unfortunately teak, some of the plantations are also dying because of the pine beetle in Uttar Kannada itself. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, yes, yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. Please tell me your name.
Sir, my name is Vipin Kumar.
Hmm.
I'm working as a researcher in ATRI. I'm engaged in as a researcher in wetland restoration.
Okay, great.
So my question is like so many people are talking about like in conservation or restoration conservation, the clean water is they said clean water is the priority of these restoration things, and the biodiversity is the secondary thing. So I want to ask like how can we like answer these questions, like because as you said in your presentation, like
Yeah.
if like these suppose like in my wetland, in restoration wetland, I have encountered like 50 species of birds.
Okay.
Like if like for example like pine beetle, if we would have like bird species that, and then these beetles or these insects are increasing, so they can harm the biodiversity which we are intervene in restoration ecology. So I just want to hear from you, sir, how can we decide these priorities of like clean water or water quality and quantity and biodiversity?
Okay. So actually, the fundamental aspect of conserving biological diversity is, at least in the freshwater swamps, okay, is about availability of the water. So in your context, in fact, I want to now tell you that when ATRI started, I wrote all the papers in the beginning when myself and few others started it actually. I was a PhD student then. Anyway, that's a different story. So in case of freshwater swamps, it is the clean water that becomes most important as one of the resource. See, how exactly you get the clean water is that only when there is a secured, well established and well preserved freshwater swamp. Okay, so obviously it's something like ultimate yield is the clean water. To get the yield, you get all the components working for you. But to make that to make the all the components working, you need to preserve. So take an indicator as a clean water as an important one. Rest of the things behind the scene would happen. I would now also give clean water as one of the most important thing that need to be addressed here.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session. It was really a great session for all of us. Now the session is about to end. For further doubts, you can contact the speaker. Thank you for all joining. Thank you.